Hello and welcome to Random Movie Time. Today we are discussing the 2020 film The Banker, directed by George Nolfi, starring Anthony Mackie, Nicholas Hoult, Nia Long, Jessie T. Usher, and Samuel L. Jackson. This is a film that was inspired by true events. It's about a young African-American boy growing up in Texas who eventually meets his future business partner, who is also African-American, and they come up with a plan to become these real estate moguls in white neighborhoods. They become so successful that eventually they actually own two banks down the road as well. So, what did you think of this film, Tommy?
Well, I really loved it. I thought this movie was incredible. I was surprised we hadn't heard about it until we discovered that it came out in 2020. So, I guess it was just sort of lost in the shuffle of all that craziness that year. But another amazing performance by Samuel L. Jackson. At this point, he just inhabits these characters so easily. He makes it look so easy. He makes it look like he's just falling off a log. It's just these incredible, deep, naturalistic characters with so much depth to them, so much nuance. It's always fascinating to watch Samuel L. Jackson, especially when he's got really great material like this to work from. Nicholas Hoult surprised me. I'd only seen him in a few things. He was in one of the X-Men movies, I believe, and he sort of had smaller roles, but in this one, he has a really big role, and he was really, really good in it. So I guess that makes two Marvel superheroes who were in this movie. Anthony Mackie, yeah, he was very good too. Yeah, all of the performances were great. Colm, it was great to see Colm again. We hadn't seen him in some years, but he used to be in everything back in the 80s and 90s, most notably Star Trek. But I hadn't seen him for a while, and I almost thought, well, is he dead or something? But no, he looks great. He's still got all his hair. He's not gray yet. That's Irish genes for you, maybe. No, he looks really great, and he did another great performance in this movie. Sadly, not a super big part, but a very important part. And, it was an important movie. There's been sort of a slew of movies and shows set during the civil rights movement in recent years. I'm thinking of Green Book, which was also amazing, The Help, Lovecraft Country. These are some stories that are pretty important. It's too bad that they're only being told now. I think if they had been told like already way back in the 70s, along with, and sort of formed a wave, with shows like Roots and things like that. Maybe we'd all be a little better off today in terms of how things are going with the political situation in the world. But anyway, yeah, great movie, great cinematography. I really liked all of the performances. I just thought it was great, and a really engaging story too. Like, it really had lots of surprises, and it was not one of these, woke movies where they're trying to insert some agenda like in a sneaky, underhanded way. This movie wears its agenda on its sleeve. Like, this is about the stuff that happened in the civil rights movement. So I thought it was very good in that way. And it reminded me in some ways of Shawshank Redemption, in which it's about a depressing subject, but the movie just feels triumphant anyway. It's still like completely, it still gives you that escapist movie feeling where you're just being entertained for 2 hours, while still having, some interesting social commentary there. So I just thought this was an absolutely first-rate movie, and if you haven't heard of it, and I won't blame you because we hadn't heard of it, you should really check it out because it's a really cool movie. What about you, Shannon? What did you think about this movie?
Yeah, I agree. It's really fascinating. I'm glad that I learned of this story. What an incredible story, and the tenacity of those men forwarding the civil rights. Wow, what a great story. I'm blown away. There was not one moment in that film that I was bored or hoping it would move along further faster.
Yeah.
The performances were great. The music was great. Everything about it was great. It was so well written, and one thing that I really love about this film is that it had so many layers in it. It addressed, racism. It addressed sexism. It addressed relationships. It addressed what the deeper motivations were for these two characters who decided to start up this real estate business in white neighborhoods. The main character was more concerned with, allowing his African American people to be able to have loans and to be able to have businesses. That was his aim. He wanted to do this to better the lives of his people. Whereas the other fellow was really jaded. He just wanted the money. Yeah. And he saw the opportunity. Yeah. But they worked well together, and they learned a lot from each other, which was really nice to see. I love the fact that it wasn't hit you over the head with the agenda like a lot of woke things are nowadays, because it really made me root for these characters. They were so three-dimensional. They were real. You could relate to them to some extent. I mean, as a white woman living in 2022, of course, it's a different story than a black guy having a business in 1956 or whatever. But, you could empathize with where they were coming from very easily. It was, like Tommy said, a sad story, but triumphant at the same time. And it was what I loved about it too, is there was a lot of positivity in there. It wasn't just being down on everybody because of the situation. So that was a really, really great thing too. I love that Colm Meaney was in this film. And guess what he played? He played an Irish businessman who also experienced racism. Big difference being, of course, that he, being a white man, could navigate those business waters openly, even though they called him a Mick and everything behind his back. So he experienced racism in a different way. But, again, great performance by him, great performance by everybody. Mm-hmm. Highly recommend it. I highly recommend this film.
Yeah, I guess the main takeaway from this movie that, they really wanted to put across, and it's a true story, by the way, which is, very interesting. They show pictures of the actual characters, the actual people at the end of the movie. I guess the main takeaway that they're trying to impress upon you is that for many, many years it was basically standard practice not to give loans to minorities. Mm-hmm. So this was, I don't know if it was written in bank procedures, but that was definitely standard practice in most of the United States, probably most of the Western world in those days before the Civil Rights Movement. But anyway,
well, and he, like in Texas especially, when the main character, eventually he has a wife and a child, and they move to California, and it's a little more forgiving there. They still, of course, have trouble, but where he grew up in Texas, he wanted to go back to Texas and buy that bank so black people could have opportunities that white people had.
Mm-hmm.
And in Texas especially, it was really, really bad, apparently, really frowned on. And even though they were doing everything legally and above board, the authorities really came down on them. So apparently, that wouldn't necessarily happen as much in other more liberal states at the time. So, yeah, sad story. And unfortunately, this sort of thing happens around the world with different sorts of people, and it's a systemic problem. And those are the types that are really, really hard to root out and change. But it's happening slowly. Hopefully it'll continue to.
But what a triumphant story, these guys rising above it, figuring out a way to get around the system.
Yeah, it's
Very
really
well
hopeful. It's a really, really hopeful. And, even the negative stuff, it doesn't get you down, because you know that, there's so much good that they did. So, how many bank buildings do you give this out of 5?
Well, I'd give it 5. Yeah, I can't find any fault with this movie. I think it's really, really good. Like I said, I don't think a lot of people have heard about it. I could be wrong, but definitely check it out. What about you, Shannon? How many bank buildings?
Yeah, I would give it 5 bank buildings out of 5. I think this is definitely worth checking out. I think everybody should give it a shot. It's got a really good message, and it's superbly written.
Yeah.
Really well done.
All right, The Banker, 2020. I guess that about does it, and we'll see you next time on
Random Movie Time.